everyone. So today we're going to be talking about section 5.12, which is on sustainability. Our learning objective for today is that you can explain the concept of sustainability, and some of the essential knowledge that you'll gain is basically what sustainability is, how it relates to humans, and some different indicators that we can look at for whether something is being sustainable or not. And we'll also learn about this concept of sustainable yield and how we actually can be sustainable with the things that we're harvesting. So sustainability, honestly, kind of feels like a bit of a buzzword. It feels like everybody nowadays is hyping that their products are sustainable, but we're going to talk about in the concept of AP Environmental Science and what it means for our class. So the definition of sustainability is going to be consuming a resource or using a space in a way that does not deplete or degrade it for future generations. So an example of this would be using compost, which is a very renewable thing, over synthetic fertilizers, which require fossil fuels in order to make them. And as we know, fossil fuels are not sustainable. They're running out. Now, there's this idea called maximum sustainable yield, and this is the maximum amount of a renewable resource that can be harvested without reducing or depleting the resources for future use. And in order to have this maximum sustainable yield, generally what we say is that harvesting at roughly half of the carrying capacity is going to be that sweet spot of maximizing our yield and what we get from it, and also allowing the population to regenerate at a sustainable rate. So if we look at this diagram here, if we've got a population growth curve, down at the bottom, we've got slow growth. And if we were to harvest when a population's around here, it could be pretty detrimental because they aren't growing very slowly and it could lead to a population crash. Now, if we actually go and harvest up here at the carrying capacity, then it's actually not so great for maximizing our yield because they are going to be growing at a slower rate and we might actually not get as much yield or profit from it. So in the middle, that's where we're going to have the maximum sustainable yield, that sweet spot. So it's having fast growth, which means it's going to be able to keep regenerating its population. But then additionally, we are actually going to be able to get a decent amount out of it. So this halfway between carrying capacity is that maximum sustainable yield sweet spot. So there's a few different things that we can look at for environmental indicators of sustainability. And these are going to be factors that help us to determine the health of the environment and guide us towards sustainable use of Earth's resources, because we can kind of watch these indicators and find out if we are sustainably using them or not. So the first indicator is going to be biodiversity. Now, there's three different types of biodiversity. We've got genetic, like within a species diversity, like how many species there are, and then ecosystems, how many ecosystems there are. And the higher biodiversity we have means the healthier the ecosystem is going to be. So we can look at biodiversity to find out the health of the ecosystem. Now, a declining biodiversity in an area can usually indicate pollution, habitat destruction, or climate change because these organisms are dying off, they are not thriving, something is wrong with their environment. So this is why we are able to actually use the global extinction rate as a really strong environmental indicator, because species extinction is going to decrease the species richness of Earth. So the more we have extinct over time, the less biodiversity we're going to have. So if we look at this graph, which shows us the percentage of species being driven to extinction by human activity, this little dotted line back here is the background extinction rate. This would be the expected, just normal extinction rate that typically we've seen over millions of years. And these colors are going to be all the different types of like amphibians, mammals, birds, reptiles, and fish. And as you can tell, all of these categories of animals are going extinct at a much faster rate than the typical just normal level that we have seen throughout the history of Earth. So humans are causing that, which is why if we're having higher global extinction rates, that's a sign that something's going wrong in the environment. Now, another indicator that we have is food production. because food production is going to indicate the ability of Earth's soil, water, and climate to support agriculture. If we're able to have good food production, it means that everything's healthy. You're able to grow things, they're able to thrive. If you're not doing so great with food production, that means that maybe your soil is going to not have the nutrients, maybe you're running out of water, maybe the climate is drastically changing. So we can actually use food production as an indicator here. Now, some of the major threats to food production are going to be kind of what I just mentioned: climate change, soil degradation, which can come from desertification, which is where you're having more areas becoming desert-like, topsoil erosion, or groundwater depletion. All of these are going to cause food production to decrease. So if we look at this map here, all of the areas in like reddish, yellow, orange colors, these are the projected areas where climate change is going to have an impact on agricultural yields. So we are seeing like Africa, South America, southern areas of North America, Australia, which if you do not know, think about all of the things that are grown in South America or the southern United States. And these are going to be areas that eventually climate change is going to have an impact on our ability to grow there, which is kind of concerning for the future of our food crops. Another thing with food production that's related to this is that increasing meat consumption is going to put a further strain on food production because it takes away water and land from grain production, and meat consumption is going to take more resources than just like growing grains. Now, one of the concerning things that we have actually seen is the fact that global grain production per capita, which means like per person, has leveled off and actually shown signs of decline recently. So if we look at this graph here, over time, this is the amount of per capita grain production. We see that it peaked in around like the 80s, and it's been actually declining since then. This is very concerning because there's a large number of people on this globe who rely on grains like rice for most of the food that sustains them. And so the fact that we're starting to potentially see some decrease in production per capita, that's an indicator that might have us a bit concerned about our sustainable use of the lands for agriculture. Now, another indicator that we can use is atmospheric temperature and carbon dioxide. So life on Earth depends on a very narrow temperature range. If things get way too high, that's going to be a problem. If they get way too cold, that's also going to be a problem. Now, carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas, which means that it traps the infrared radiation and warms Earth's atmosphere. We're going to see that increased carbon dioxide leads to increased temperatures. So if you look at the way that the Earth works, we've got solar energy that comes in and warms up Earth's temperature. Now, some of our heat is lost back out to outer space, but because of our atmosphere, a lot of it actually gets trapped in here because of these greenhouse gases, which we normally have greenhouse gases in our atmosphere. They're part of what makes Earth habitable. But the problem is when we're adding greenhouse gases, this layer of heat trapping gases gets thicker, which means we're having less and less of this heat able to escape, and more of it is getting stuck here, which is going to continue warming our temperatures. So this is why when we increase carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, that leads to increased temperatures. And as we can see, over time, especially in the past 100-ish years, there has been such a drastic increase of the carbon dioxide that is in the atmosphere. And because it leads to changes in temperature, which impacts climates, this is why we monitor it and we're concerned about the patterns that we see. Now, there's things that are going to increase this atmospheric carbon dioxide. The first is going to be deforestation, where we're taking out trees. This is going to take away the ability of carbon dioxide to be taken out of the atmosphere and into plants, because plants take in carbon dioxide when they do photosynthesis. Now, additionally, combustion of fossil fuels is going to emit carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So both of these happening together is going to lead to increased amounts of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And when we have increasing carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, as I said, it leads to increased temperatures. And this shows us that it's not going to be sustainable. And part of the reason why it's not sustainable is it's actually going to continue impacting things that we need to be living in a sustainable way. It's going to be drying out farmable land. It will be destroying habitats. It will be worsening storm intensity. So things like tornadoes and hurricanes and droughts and wildfires are all going to increase when we are having this increasing atmospheric temperature, which is not so great for those of us trying to live here on planet Earth. So how is it that human populations and resource depletion are related to each other? Well, as human population grows, resource depletion is also going to grow. And if you look at how much the world population has increased over the past 12,000 years, you can see that in the past, 1,000, it has skyrocketed. And even in the past couple hundred years, we have gotten growing at an exponential rate. So as this population keeps growing, we're going to be seeing more resource depletion occurring. Resources are going to be harvested unsustainably from natural ecosystems, and they're going to degrade that ecosystem health. So as we're taking out all these things that we need, it's going to lead to these ecosystems being less and less healthy. Now, some of the ways that this occurs, for example, when we have the need for more paper, this is going to lead to more deforestation. When we need more food to feed all these people, it's going to lead to soil erosion, deforestation, groundwater depletion. When we are doing more traveling, this is where we're going to need more fossil fuels mined. It's going to lead to air, water, soil pollution, and habitat destruction because of, mining is disruptive, but then also the combustion of those fossil fuels emitting carbon dioxide into the atmosphere like we just talked about. So if you look at this graph here, this shows the world population and cumulative deforestation. So if you're looking as the population is increasing, deforestation is also going to be increasing, which is going to lead to further resource depletion, less carbon dioxide coming from out of the atmosphere, and just general decline in ecosystem health. So what I want you to do is for practice FRQ 5.12, I want you to look at this chart here. We're going to be practicing the suggested skill of data analysis. I want you to look at these 5 students and explain which student most likely lives in a highly developed, aka wealthy, country. And I want you to describe how one of the 4 categories of ecological footprint, which you can see these 4 listed up here on the top, how one of the 4 categories of ecological footprint can serve as an environmental indicator. So that will be your practice FRQ 5.12, and those were your notes on 5.12 about sustainability.